Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the very last session of ConsumerOpps 2022. My name is Eric Corrett from Market Eye. Delighted to have Laron Fendel here as our final speaker from Nutritional Growth Solutions, ticker code NGS. Laron, thank you for joining us early morning in Israel.
Thank you, Eric.
So, Laron, let's start with a bit of a potted history of NGS for those that don't know the story. Talk to us about who NGS is, what you're doing, what markets you're operating in.
Sure. So thank you, Eric, and congratulations for arranging such a successful conference. It is a pleasure being here today, although just virtually. And to your question, NGS was created by a team of expert doctors with the goal of ensuring that children around the world have access to healthy nutrition that supports growth development. And basically what we do is we are a milk formula company selling yummy shakes, but with an edge. Now, our products were developed and tested by doctors, and they're actually patented. Our flagship Healthy Heights products were clinically proven to help kids grow taller by optimizing their nutritional intake and making sure that their bodies have all of the needed building blocks to meet their height potential. We are targeting children 3 years old and up, so we're not really playing in the highly competitive, highly regulated infant formula market. And last thing I'll note before letting you move on to your other questions is that our products are currently available in the US, in Italy, in Israel, and in China.
Great, thanks, Laron. I should have said to the audience, just a reminder, happy to take questions, so please use the text box to the right of your screen to enter in any questions. You mentioned, Laron, a little bit about the competitive environment and not playing in that infant formula space. So can you talk to us a little bit more about the competitive environment that you are operating in? Who are maybe some of the brands that we know? And then I think really importantly, what sets NGS apart?
Yes, so luckily there are other brands out there looking to help kids grow through nutrition. Most of the big brands out there are owned by pharma companies and are more focused, I say, on weight gain rather than height gain. And these products were developed for children who are suffering from malnutrition, and therefore they are designed to have lots of calories while remaining low costs, which is obviously very important for this population. So they usually contain a high quantity of sugars and fats. On the other end, you can find general healthy shakes and snacks with no claims and no clinical backing. And what we're doing is we're finally able to offer families high quality products with clean label, low sugar levels, lots of protein, and high-end ingredients, together with a very high standard of clinical backing. And this is ensuring that kids drinking Healthy Heights at least 3 months can really see the effect on height.
Great. So just in terms of the clinical backing and the clinical studies, maybe could you just talk a little bit about that? What were the clinical studies and what were the results? And I guess, and how important do you see that as a point of difference?
So because we're coming from a pediatric hospital, this really makes it possible for us to run clinical studies, who then make it possible for us to write claims on our products, write patents, and really just go to sleep every night knowing that we're selling products that help children. But in regards to this specific clinical study that we ran on Healthy Heights, this was a gold standard clinical study. So this is a placebo-controlled, randomized, double-blind clinical study with 200 children, where 100 children got Healthy Heights for 6 months. The other 100 got a placebo product, which is just milk powder with no added vitamins and minerals. And we saw that after 3 months already, the kids who had Healthy Heights grew significantly more in height than the children in the control group. And basically what we saw in 1 year was that the kids in the control group, they grew about 6 centimeters per year. And the kids who had healthy heights grew about 7.5 centimeters. So that would be 25% more to their height in that year, with something that's just food. I mean, it's not hormones, it's not drugs, it's just really targeted nutrition.
Great. Okay. So you mentioned that you're in North America, entering the Asia Pacific market, and also Italy. Obviously, US and China are huge markets. NGS is a fairly small company compared to perhaps some of the bigger names out there. What's the strategy? How do you get out there? How do you mass market the product and build the business?
So, you mentioned US and China, and yes, these are the 2 biggest markets in the world, and yet they couldn't be more different from each other. And I hope it doesn't sound like a cliche, but when we're selling in these markets, we're really taking an approach of sell globally, but think locally. And a big part of that is really hiring people who know what they're doing, know these markets. And this is part of what we've been doing over the past year. And those of you who have been following us have been seeing that, and we're continuing to do that. But if I had to give a broad answer, it's that to what's the difference probably between the markets is that in the US, we found that the clean label and the healthy ingredients resonate more with families, whereas in China, there is probably more curiosity around the clinical data, and we bring forward more the medical team and the expertise. At the end of the day, though, in both countries, we find caring parents and guardians who are just looking to help their kids grow into the best person they can become. And NGS is just there to help them with their journey to become just a tiny bit easier.
Got it. So just in terms of the US and China and the go-to market and the sales channels, maybe could you talk a little bit about that? So where would customers find the stock? Where are you selling into?
Yes, so right now we're selling in the US. We started direct to consumer, and we've been doing that since 2018. In the past year, we also started executing on our retail strategy in the US. So looking to expand from just an e-commerce play into brick and mortar. The first step was established with Walmart.com. So although it's still e-commerce, now we're finally working with Walmart to be able to bring our products to even more children in the US, and also building our brick and mortar distribution right now as we speak. In China, we are starting as a cross-border e-commerce business, selling from New Zealand and Australia into China.
Got it. So you just mentioned New Zealand. You've recently started production in New Zealand. Can you talk a little bit about why the production in New Zealand is so important and how that feeds into the Asia Pacific strategy?
Yes, so when we started selling into China, we started by selling a product that's manufactured in the US, because our main manufacturing site is in the US in Utah. But there are so many challenges to selling US-made product into China. So we looked into other options, and we finally selected New Zealand production because of 3 reasons. And these would be the quality. I mean, the New Zealand milk and whey protein is very highly regarded around the world, and also specifically in China as being high quality. Because of logistic costs, it's just so much easier to ship product from New Zealand into China than from the US. And also just the relationship with China make it easier also to ship product from New Zealand. And the specific manufacturing facilities that we are working in New Zealand, they have China FDA approval. So this makes it even more easier. Now, we hope to start selling the New Zealand version in China in May, because it's now being produced. I mean, it's already being produced and it's now being shipped into China. Obviously, having the New Zealand manufacturing up and running, this opens up other markets in the region as well for us. So we are now looking at our expansion into other markets in the region, including Australia.
Great. Look forward to seeing it on the shelves here. talked a little bit about logistics, supply chain issues. It's been quite topical throughout the last 2 days in terms of what we're seeing across the globe. How have you fared in that sense in terms of, availability and logistics around, moving product?
Yeah, so I think supply chain issues, these global supply chain issues really affected anyone, and we're not different. We have struggled with inventory in the US and in China over the past few months. But luckily, this is mostly in the rearview mirror at this point in time. The New Zealand production, as I said, is finally up and running. Their product was manufactured and now being shipped to China. In the US, we secured a full truck of whey protein from the New Zealand milk manufacturer, Fonterra, for the US. So that should really help us with our US production. So the short answer is yes, we've struggled with global supply chain issues, but luckily this has now been resolved.
Excellent. So just talking a little bit now about your product and your product range. Be great if you could just talk through, what you're currently selling now. And obviously, earlier this week there was an announcement about a new shake range that was released. And then maybe forward-looking, what does the product range look like over the next 6 to 12 months?
Sure. So I just looked at it the other day, and when we listed on the Australian Stock Exchange late 2020, we were only selling our flagship product, which is the Healthy Heights Grow Daily 3+ for children 3 years old and up. But since then, we launched our new products for children 10 years old and up, and our bars product. And as you mentioned, just earlier this week, we launched our new variety of kids protein dairy and kids protein vegan to support everyday health in children. And we just continue to experience very high demand from parents requesting a healthy protein for children who aren't necessarily looking for the height growth benefit. And it was important for us to also include vegan formulas to ensure that even more children can have access to our products.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just got something saying that my internet wasn't stable, so I hope I'm still coming across.
Yeah.
And these shakes are just a perfect way for picky eaters or those that have dairy intolerances to gain the necessary nutrients to support healthy growth and development. And this is what we've been doing over the past year. Next on for us on the horizon is launching a new product for girls 10 years old and up, because the other product that we launched was for boys 10 years old and up. And the reason for the differentiation is because as children enter puberty, they have different nutritional needs. So we really designed 2 different products, one for girls and one for boys for this very unique age group of 10 years old and up. We are also working on a new sports formula, which I'm especially excited about. We've had some delays with the clinical study there because of COVID, but this is again also now on track to be launched. And this is a new protein shake for children who are doing a lot of sports to help them with their sports performance as well as with their general nutritional needs.
Got it. So just to confirm that those new products that you're talking about being launched, are they all clinically backed products as well, or are there some of those clinical studies still underway?
So it's a mix. The teen product that we launched earlier this year, this has the clinical backing, and we published the clinical results for that. But for example, the kids protein shake is not clinical backed because it doesn't have any specific functionality, but it's just a great protein shake for children and for parents looking to supplement their kids' nutrition with more protein. And by the way, we also added some veggies and fruits to that blend. So we can also sneak in some good stuff like broccoli and cabbage and mango and papaya into these shakes.
You lost me with the broccoli there, Laurent. And probably my kids too. But you also mentioned about the vegan range with the shakes. Is the intention to roll out a vegan range across other products as well?
It's a good question, but right now the vegan is going to be with the kids protein, but not with the Grow Daily variety. And the reason for that is that we did do some clinical tests to see the effect of plant-based proteins on kids' growth, and we just couldn't replicate the great outcome that we could get with the whey protein when we tried it with plant-based. I mean, it just doesn't have the same effect on kids' growth.
Got it. I think one of the things be worth exploring, it seems to be a key point of difference for NGS, particularly in the US market, is around the Medicaid or the reimbursement aspect. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that and how your product, is eligible for that?
Yes, so our original variety of Healthy Heights for kids 3 years old and up is eligible for insurance reimbursement in the US. And the way to get it is by getting a letter of medical necessity from the doctor saying that the child is not meeting their height potential, probably due to picky eatiness. So because the child isn't eating as properly, they could use some supplement, and then they can get a letter of medical necessity and get reimbursement for their purchase of Healthy Heights. And what's cool is that they can get the reimbursement even if they're purchasing it from Amazon or from our website.
Right. So I'm assuming that a lot of your customers would repeat purchase, right? So, they go through a tin or a few packets for their kids and then they repeat. Can you maybe talk a little bit about repeat purchases, and are there like loyalty plans or subscription plans for customers?
Yeah, so you asked me earlier about how we compete against big brands, obviously being a smaller company. And I think having the repeat buyers and the retention of our customers is the key to that. And the way we are able to achieve that is just because I think our customers are seeing results. And so they're starting with the shake and they're just seeing the results. So they're continuing and staying with us. And this is why we're seeing that over 50% of our sales in the US are actually coming from repeat buyers.
Great. You mentioned that you're in Italy. What are the sort of longer term plans around further geographic expansion? You also talked about, growing in the Asia Pacific region. What about broader European markets?
So for us right now, if we're looking at the next few years, the focus is really US, China, and Southeast Asia. We are also doing some things in Europe, and we are expanding our sales there. But I wouldn't say this is a point of focus for us. For us, it's really now about getting more traction in the US, China, and Southeast Asia.
Yeah, makes sense. Questions come through. You touched on it a little bit earlier, but just around the main ways that the Chinese and US markets are different in terms of distribution channels and reputation of the company and product. Can you add some color there?
Yes, so I think in terms of the different channels, obviously we are online in both places, but even the online channels are quite different between US and China. So for China, we're doing right now what's called cross-border e-commerce, meaning we're selling from New Zealand or from Australia our product into China using global platforms like Tmall Global, which is owned by Alibaba, but also other global platforms like JD, TikTok, Little Red Book, and others. We are working a lot with influencers because this is really the key in China, at least for us, to see growth in sales.
Got it. Another question that's come through is just about the retail expansion strategy in the US. So what does that look like? Obviously, you're selling online now. What does that look like going forward, and where would people expect to see your products in the US?
So the way we're rolling out our retail expansion in the US, it's going to be starting with the more what we call specialty foods. So like the Whole Foods of the world, but there are like a bunch of other chains like that, like Sprouts, Jimbo's, Trader Joe's, all of the more high-end retail chains. And this is how we are going to build our reputation and brand credibility. then rolling out from there into two channels. One is pharmacies, where we already are in some pharmacies, but really expand our presence in pharmacies, and then build mass through retail and go into the bigger chains like the Walmart, Targets of the world.
Got it. Another question for you, Laurent, might be a little bit hard one for you to answer, but just about the appointment of Dave Fenlon recently as chairman of NGS. He was previously the CEO of BWX. The question is Dave going to make NGS as big as BWX?
Bigger.
I love it. Let's hope so. Just looking through the list of questions. You talked about manufacturing in NZ. You're also doing some manufacturing in the US. How do you think about that going forward? Are those two hubs enough for the business to support the growth over the sort of the medium term? Do you see new manufacturing facilities being required?
So I do see more manufacturing facilities being required, but I still think it will be in the US and in New Zealand. So we're probably in 2 years or so, we might want to look into expanding into more manufacturing facilities. Having said that, I think for the next 12 to 24 months, the manufacturing facilities that we are working with, both in the US and in New Zealand, are quite large. And this is why we chose them, because they have this really big capacity. So we can execute on our growth plans for the near-term future with these facilities.
Right. Okay, so just conscious of time, I think we've got time for one or two more questions. So if you do have a question, please use the text box on the right-hand screen. Next question, but it comes up every time, Laurent, just around Australia. You mentioned it, through the production of New Zealand, you're hoping to be able to sell in Australia. What's the timeline around potential sales here in Australia?
It's a good question. And I mean, right now we're really looking into our strategy into the Australian market. Obviously, it's not a huge market, so we want to make sure that we're doing it properly. I'm getting requests, I think, every day from people in Australia about our products, and this is a big priority for me to make the product available in Australia. Right now, we're just looking into what would be the best path to get the product into this market.
Okay, great. Maybe one last one, or I'll wrap two in here. In terms of the next 6 to 12 months, I guess, what do you see as the key priorities that investors should be keeping an eye out for, that you're looking to achieve? And then maybe beyond that, what does NGS look like in 5 years' time?
So I think for the next 6 months, I would really keep an eye on distribution. I mean, this will be the key, really rolling out the retail distribution in the US, and in parallel, looking at China, especially with the shopping holidays and shopping events and the New Zealand product launch. So I think this is the 6 months. But if we look further into the next 5 years, to put it simply, I think NGS's growth continues to build on adding more products, more geographies, and more sales channels. This is how we'll continue to build NGS towards being a leading global player. And in 5 years' time, I see NGS selling a large suite of products, pediatric nutrition products in the US, in China, in Southeast Asia, and yes, Eric, also in Australia and in Europe, carried in broad distribution, helping millions of families around the world nurture their children to reach their full potential.
Well, that's great, Laurent. Well, you certainly got me excited. I mean, it's great to hear you've got a clinically backed product and operating in huge markets with huge growth opportunities. So thank you very much for sharing the story today, Laurent. If there's any investors that are on the webinar that haven't had any of their questions answered, or think of some afterwards, please feel free to contact Laurent or myself. Our contact details are on the ASX releases. So Laurent, again, thanks for joining us in your early morning.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here today.